It's about a year late, but today I'm finally going to be reviewing the Phantom from NECA's Defenders of the Earth line. This was the third and final figure in an initial wave of 3, including Ming the Merciless and Flash Gordon. And just like both of those characters, I've always had something of a soft spot for the Phantom because I love these old pulpy characters. There's something quite charming about the pulp heroes and villains of yesteryear. And there's something particularly cool about the Phantom's look. So without further ado, let's take a look at the packaging. Well, this is pretty familiar to anyone who saw the previous releases in this line. It is mostly window display. Behind the figure we have this wonderful bright yellow card, so it really makes the figure pop out the packaging, which is great. At the bottom of the packaging we have this digital rendered image of the Phantom sort of punching his way out, which looks really cool. I really like what they've done here, and you'll notice that NECA have changed their logo to match that of Galoob, the original toy company who produced the Defenders of the Earth figures back in the day. If we look at the side panel, we can see this is quite a chunky space to use, and I think they've used the space quite wisely here. They've kept the look and tone of the original animated series, so we have that fantastic Defenders of the Earth logo, and then we have this cool image of the toy itself in this sort of circle, which I think looks really good. It's nice because you can put these up, stack these next to each other on the shelf, and they all look uniform but distinctively different. Finally, if we look at the back of the packaging, I think they've done a tremendous job with this. This is quite exciting. It's definitely kind of nostalgic. It takes me back to the old toy lines of the 80s and 90s that would show the other figures in the line. But at the top of the packaging, we have the Defenders of the Earth logo. We have the Earth there and the various characters above it. I think this looks really cool. There's a little bit of bio about them, which is great. We have this main strip panel showing the other characters in the line. So we can see characters from the second wave there, including Mandrake the Magician, which I'm keen to get my hands on as soon as possible. And then at the bottom, we have a larger image of the Phantom figure itself and some of his vital stats, which I think is a really cool approach. I think this is really fun and pretty presentable. All credit to NECA. This figure has a very high quality feel to it. It's nice and sturdy and strong, it's quite weighty, and it looks pretty colourful and fun without compromising on texture and detail. And a really good example of that is actually the head sculpt itself, because here all the proportions look accurate. The overall look, aesthetic, design is pretty faithful to what we see on screen in the animated series and the comic books and whatever media you care to think of. It hasn't compromised that original look of this character at all, so it's quite simple in terms of the paint apps on the skull cap and on the eye mask, and yet we can see so much detail and texturing on the stubble around the face and chin there. I think this looks absolutely tremendous. This gives it an added extra sense of detail and texture, which makes it more lifelike and realistic, and it just works really well with the overall look and aesthetic of the figure itself. So I'm really pleased with this, and we can continue to see this throughout the rest of the sculpt. Of course, this is a big muscular character, very similar to the Flash Gordon mold that we saw previously, but again, for a costume that is pretty much one tone of purple, they've actually got some nice shading and highlights going on here to really accentuate this mold and make it look textured and realistic, which is great. I also really love this rubber belt that they've given him here with the skull icon as well on the centre of the buckle, which I think looks really cool, and I think they've done a really good job of this. Likewise, if we look at the two fists that he comes with in packaging, he's got both of his rings there. This looks fantastic, and I'm really pleased that we have this character where he actually has two closed fists. That's quite a rarity, and it's really fun to see. If we look at the boots, there's nothing really particularly special here. This is pretty much what we saw with the Flash Gordon figure, but again, they're cut pretty nicely, and I do like the paint that they've used for the black of the boots because it gives that real shiny quality, which is really cool. The only negative is where we can see the joint there. Of course, the paint does come away when you move that, so you can see here there is that rather egregious bit of purple sticking out the middle of the joint. There's not really an awful lot you can do about this, and I think it's a fair trade-off. In terms of articulation, he has a ball joint in his head, so he can move his head from side to side. He can lean it left and right as well, and of course he can also nod it up and down. So there's a pretty good range of motion here, which is great. He also has ball joints in the shoulders, so of course he can lift those arms up and out, which is great. There is a complementary bicep swivel here as well, although I've got to be honest, mine is very stiff and quite resistant, so I wasn't going to push this too far and snap the joint. He's got double joints at the elbow, so that hand can go all the way back there and touch his head, which is fantastic. Then he has a pin swivel at the wrist, so of course he can rotate that hand all the way around, and it will also hinge forwards and backwards a good distance as well. There is a straight swivel at the waist, so he can move from side to side, and there is this ab crunch, which yeah, you have to work with this a little bit. It will go back a good distance. It doesn't really go forward particularly at all, which is a shame. There's more ball joints in the hips, and these are neatly disguised for the most part, so you can kick these legs out to the side, but you can also swivel them as well from side to side. Now the legs will kick forwards, they'll kick backwards, and there is a double joint at the knee there as well, so you can get that lower leg all the way back, which is great. There is a boot cut swivel as well at the top of the boot there, and then there is finally that ankle pivot as well, so of course that foot can hinge forwards and backwards, and there is also the toe articulation there as well. He also comes with quite a few extra goodies. Now, a lot of these have been recycled from the Flash Gordon figure we've seen previously, but let's take a look. He has 2 extra right hands. One is a gripping hand for his sort of phaser weapon pistol, for lack of a better description, and another is another closed fist with a space for the ring blast effect. Of course, he also comes with that ring blast effect, which is great. He has that phaser pistol as well, which we will recognise from the Flash Gordon because it's identical, and he also has the same accessories there, including the long and short blast effects for that pistol. But most surprisingly is the addition of Zuffy, which I don't think anyone was expecting. But this is pretty cool and very, very different to any of the other offerings in this line. And surprisingly, Zuffy is actually articulated as well. So there is actually a straight swivel at the head that will allow the head to move from side to side. There's a swivel at the shoulder there that will allow the arm to lift up and down. The hips, there's another ball joint there allowing those legs to kick out to the side and kick forwards and backwards. And then finally, there's another swivel at the tail, allowing that to rotate 360 degrees. Of all of these extra pieces, the one that is the most distinctive to the Phantom is his ring blast effect. I think this is a really cool choice and it works really well. You simply slide that peg into the peg hole in his wrist and the effect is pretty surprisingly good. I think this is very effective and looks really, really fun. As you'd expect, he has no problems holding that phaser, and this looks pretty cool. This pistol effect, again, that's nicely painted, and it looks pretty decent. Of course, we have 2 blast effects, so they can go on the very end of the tip of the barrel, which is pretty cool. So we have that short blast effect, which looks pretty nice, probably my favourite of the 2, in fact. And then, of course, we have the long blast effect as well, which is quite similar to the ring blast, but this looks really cool. And, of course, it helps create various dynamic displays, which is fantastic. As for Zuffy, well, I can take or leave him, to be honest. It's not a character that I was expecting to get. It's not one that I think adds an awful lot to the figure. But that said, it is nice for the sense of world building, I suppose, and I think that's pretty cool. And I'm sure there's many collectors out there who will really appreciate having this minifigure included with the Phantom. So, final thoughts for me, I'm going to give this 4 stars. I actually think this is a tremendous figure. I actually like him much more than I thought I was going to be honest. I thought this would be quite a simple figure. I thought it would be pretty much a carbon copy of the Flash Gordon figure, which was a very good figure in its own right, but I wasn't expecting to enjoy this figure quite as much as I have done. In fact, he might be a close second to Ming for me. He might actually overtake Flash Gordon. I think this is a really nice figure. I love the overall look. I really particularly love this blast effect that he's given here from his ring, and I think it's just a really cool looking figure all in all. So I think they've done a great job with this, and if you have tracked down the other 2 in this first wave, then obviously you're probably going to want to add this guy to the collection as well. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.